So we're live and recording. Over to you, mate.
Good. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today, just to see how we can help each other, is a model that I'm very keen on, and I use in my business, called the 5 of a cohesive team, and it's a foundational model, and the foundation is vulnerable trust. You can't really build a great team until you've got that foundation of vulnerable trust. Once you've got vulnerable trust, you can move on to the second behavior, which is the ability to have constructive conflict. So when you have constructive conflict, you can debate issues, get them all out on the table. So even if your idea isn't taken forward, you know it's been heard, and then you can commit, which is the third behavior. You can commit to the decisions that come out of that. So you can't have the conflict without the trust. You can't commit unless you had the conflict and the productive debate. Gotcha. Once you've got the commitment in place, you can then hold each other accountable for delivering what you commit to. And finally, as a team, you attend to results. You make sure that the results you're trying to get come through. So that's the 5 behaviors: trust, commitment, accountability, and attention to results. So
that was trust, conflict,
commitment, accountability, and results.
Okay.
And what it would be good to talk about today is that foundation of trust and what we mean by trust. And I guess you have got a lot of input coming at it from an emotional intelligence point of view. I'm very keen on it for how we get it to show up in team behavior, because it's, as we say, it's the foundation. It's very important.
And so I just want to make clear, just for the recording purposes, is that right at the very beginning, when you said the 5 dysfunctions of a team, I couldn't hear the 2 words 5 dysfunctions. So let's just make sure that for anybody watching this, we are talking about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And also we're looking specifically at the behaviors, as you've just highlighted. And we're going to talk about trust today.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself, and then I'll say a little bit about myself?
Yeah, sure. Well, so my background is largely corporate. I've done something like 35 years in some fairly big businesses: BP, Castrol, International Paint, and Courtaulds. And I think just by the way I naturally am, I like to see things done well, and I like to see people working well together. It's a function of the way I was brought up with my parents, the way that as the eldest person in my family, I had that sort of leadership and trying to pull everybody together. But over my corporate career, I sort of became the go-to person for getting teams aligned and getting stuff done. So I led some fairly big projects, big change management things for those large businesses. When I left corporate, I decided that what I really wanted to do was to get to be as influential as I could in getting teams to work really well together. So I know that out there are lots of businesses, lots of organizations that don't function as well as they could. And it's my mission to try and help as many as I can be as good as they can.
Fantastic. And you're running your own consultancy business?
Yeah, I run my own consultancy, IPT business development. Yeah.
Very nice. Great. And just for the benefit of those who are watching, I'm Sean, the EQ Commando. Yeah. The EQ and Commando are phrases you generally don't see together in the same sentence. EQ, of course, meaning emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. And as a former Royal Marines Commando, I believe that I'm in a position to look back over my career and draw and bring out some of the deep learnings that are emotionally intelligence based, and share them into the business community. And how I do that is I work with leaders of 6, 7, 8 figure businesses. I help them to stop doing, if they are doing it, and most appear to be, stop using the 6 gun of shame where they're blaming everybody else for the problems and challenges in their organization. And I like to watch as the enlightenment and the light switch goes on, as they realize there are three fingers pointing back at them. So what I ostensibly do is I work with the leadership, but go in under the guise of doing team development.
Right.
And it's something that I've now been doing for only a couple of years, but I have been in business and industry since '96 when I left the Royal Marines.
Yeah.
I've run my own business and a number of businesses, and I've worked with companies all over the globe, from small, medium enterprises right up to multi-million pound organizations. So what we're doing here today, we seem to have a love and a joy of helping organizations become more cohesive, more productive, and to create workplaces that people really love to be in.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's our joint
absolutely
passion here. So, all right. So with that in mind, let's have a look at trust. Give us your angle on what it is and why it matters.
Well, why does it matter? It matters because it's about essentially it's how you feel as a team. So if I look back on my corporate career, I've been in teams where one can't be oneself, one is guarded, one doesn't want to admit mistakes, one doesn't want to ask for help because it will be seen as weakness and used against you. So, and that's a term actually used by Google in some research they did about feeling psychologically unsafe, right? So it's about getting the team to the point where they are not worried about opening up. They can say, "I'm sorry, I got that wrong." They can say, "Your idea is better than mine." They can say, "I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what to do. Can you help me?" Now, when you have a team that is comfortable doing that, that is the basis on which you can start to build. But in my experience, a large percentage of the teams that I've worked for and observed don't
have that.
So they don't have that basis of trust. And in my experience too, many leadership teams don't behave as a team. They're more a group of department heads batting for their own department.
So there's no real cohesion, there's no real trust. Everybody's in it for themselves, or perhaps not everybody's in it for themselves, but there are a number of key players who are in it for themselves quite clearly, and that creates an unsafe environment, a culture of fear and distrust within the organization.
Usually some characters have a personal agenda driven by their career or their ego, and some are driven by a sort of an erroneous connection to their department, and feel that they need to bat for their department against other departments for precious resources, etc.
So that's
that may be in the interests of the organization as a whole.
So that's I think it's Simon Sinek says the finite game as opposed to an infinite game.
Finite game, exactly.
So they believe there's only a set amount of resources and they've got to fight their corner to get it, rather than collaborate with others in order to, with an abundance mentality that just says, look, there's plenty, as long as we're working together as a team. Then we can access as much resources as we need.
And when you have that level of vulnerable trust in a team, you are comfortable saying, actually, I'll forego some resources and allow the other team to have it, or the other department to have it, because it's the right thing for the business as a whole.
Agreed.
Down the line, the same will be granted to you if you need extra resources. It's about that team being as one, aligned around what their mission is, and the best way of getting. Can't do that if you don't trust each other.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned the Google research. Was that called the Aristotle?
Aristotle.
So that's worth, if somebody's interested in this, that's worth having a Google to find out what study Google did on that. It's called Aristotle. So I thought it was.
It found that, and this was quite interesting actually. It found that the best teams aren't necessarily formed from the most intelligent and able people, but they're from the teams that behave the best and have the best the best behaviors. And the number one of the 5 things that they picked out that were important for real teamwork was psychological safety.
Yeah.
Which translates in my terms to vulnerable trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love how you use that phrase, vulnerable trust,
Yeah.
because so few of us, and bearing in mind, you know, historically coming from a Royal Marines background, people would not really believe on the face of it that we had vulnerable trust.
Yeah.
We definitely had to be in the space where, you know, if we went on an operation, when we came back, there was always an open, honest debrief. And it was in that time where you were able to communicate with others, where you observe them doing something and put the rest of the team in danger.
Yeah.
And that's a very powerful place to be in for all of us, because you might be the person on the receiving end where you screwed up. And the questions that we always had were, you're operating at such a high level. Are you capable of operating at this high level? Because if you're screwing up, once it happens, it's like the accidents, it happens. Twice, one more time when we're actually into a pattern. So the question there is, what are you doing in the background, Sean, for instance, that has helped to create the environment for you to screw up? Now, it might have been something as simple, you know, you're not taking care of your health and fitness. You're not spending time on the range enough. So then we're talking about personal responsibility. So actually, one of the things to have vulnerable trust, as I see it, is that each individual must come with an understanding that they are personally responsible for their thoughts and the behaviors that come from the thoughts that they're having. So it's thoughts will trigger every thought we have has a meaning attached to it, and that meaning that we give it triggers an emotion. So when we trigger the emotion, our behaviors are generally based on the emotion that we're feeling. So if we're not feeling safe, then something's happening in the organization that has triggered that. And that may have been a water cooler conversation. It could have been something demonstrated by your senior leaders on a way to act within an organization. What struck me most as I looked back through my careers was within the Marines, we very, very clearly, we felt very safe to be able to look someone in the eye and said, "You let us down." Now, that's not us blaming, judging, or giving them a hard time. We're just saying, you let us down. And in order to operate at this level, we want to help you up your standard. B, you have to take responsibility to up your standard. But also 3, if what we do to help you falls on deaf ears and you don't step up and be responsible, then you can't be part of this team anymore. Now, that is a responsibility of the individual to make that choice in their actions, their behaviors, and how they interact with others. So trust was incredibly important back then. And I've seen it, as you have, in many organizations where there just is no real trust.
It's corrosive.
So
and so you've demonstrated there. So actually, the two first steps of those, the 2 behaviors in the model, because you've talked about the vulnerable trust, giving you permission to say, "You let us down there." That's entering into the conflict thing, you know, where you're raising issues and you're doing it against, I guess, a set of ground rules that you've established, either explicitly or implicitly, that this is the way we behave. This is the way we behave in terms of vulnerable trust. And if we need to, because we trust you and because we can be vulnerable, admit when we've made a mistake, and equally, we'll tell you if we think you've made a mistake. It works well in the military, and actually it works really well in business. But businesses, for some reason, don't get there as often.
Yeah. So
Because
there's
maybe because it's not so much a life and death issue.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think, well, something I've noticed in a lot of organizations and quite a number I'm currently working with is when they look to change the culture in the organization, they want to build trust. They look specifically at the teams that they've got and the people within the organizations. But I ask them to go wider than that and to go deeper. And the reason for that is because if you have created that culture of trust in an organization such that other people are attracted to it, people aligned with your vision, values, etc. If you as you're attracting those people, you're already upping the level of your organization by the quality of individuals coming in. Now, what that tells me immediately is if you do have these, if you have low trust culture and low trust environment, then you've got to immediately look not just at your team, but at the whole onboarding process. And I've found that most organizations interview mostly based on a CV.
Yeah.
So they look through, I mean, I think CVs are the greatest work of fiction since other greatest works of fiction. And so they're interviewing based on CV, as opposed to a CV to fill a role, to fill a function within the organization, as opposed to who do we want to bring into this organization that will add more value than their CV or their job function. I think if you make that little change, and there's social intelligence hiring, for instance, so you bring the right people into the organization, and it should be a given that those people you're looking to bring into your organization have already got the skills to do the job. But are they the right fit for your vision and values?
Exactly, attitude and values, absolutely. But I would also say, rather than looking down, you've got to start off by looking at the top team, because if you haven't got it right at the top team, you're not going to see the right behaviors flowing down through the organization.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, I've seen this in big companies where you've got supply chain fighting with marketing because the directors don't see eye to eye. All those sort of things, so you've got to get it right at the top, and it's about getting the team cohesive, as we've talked through behaviors, and also aligned around the direction that they things right. That's a great start.
So real question then is, so we're talking about trust. How do you build trust? You've got a low trust environment. You've got leaders at the top are not trusted. The team leaders are not trusting each other because they're fighting for their own department or what have you. The people coming into the organization are seeing this going on and just assimilate it as how they'll be in the workplace. So what do we do about it? How do we build trust?
Well, it requires a commitment from the top. Okay, so the leadership needs to get that building vulnerable trust and cohesion in that top team is going to be of great value, which it always is for his or her business. And then there are various ways of doing it. The leader actually, in establishing vulnerable trust, you've got to work with the leader to get the leader trust. Okay, so you've got to get to the leader to the point where he or she is willing to say, look, the way we've been running this is wrong and it's my fault. What I'd like us to do, right? So, and then there's a whole host of things. I use a particular assessment where the team fills in an online profile, and the team self-assesses how good it thinks it is on vulnerable trust and the reasons why. And then we work through, these are the reasons why you as a team aren't in a good place on vulnerable trust. These are the things that you can do to move in the right direction. And we have sort of workshops where we finish up with action plans that are built by the team to get the team into that better position of vulnerable trust.
So that gives them ownership. That gives the
they build it themselves,
and the team the ownership of how to fix it. You make a very what I consider to be a really valid point is I will not work with an organization unless the leadership is totally on board. And usually the leadership, as I touched on earlier, leadership usually in some way wants me to come in to help fix the problems with their team but we very, very quickly have agreement and commitment from the leaders to be involved in the whole process. Because you just can't change a team and not have the leader on board, because the leader's still working off the old paradigm and the old challenges and issues. And the team, and that's one of the ways, the first ways of building trust.
So question back to you, Sean. Here's one that I come across quite a bit, which is where a member of the leadership team, but not the leader, sees the need for the team to get cohesive and build on that basis of vulnerable trust. But the leader isn't listening to that member of the team. How do you approach that? Or do you go somewhere easier?
Yeah. Well, first off, no, I mean, that's a very interesting question. I actually have something going on right now with an organization, and it's not exactly like that, because the leader is at least open. In this case, as opposed to not listening to the person, they are listening to the person, but they're doing it in a sort of hands-off, slightly distant approach. But I'm working with a senior director, and that the leader in the organization has categorically stated that he wants to see the results first. And so I've turned it around slightly, and I said, so what results do you want to see? And are they aligned with your vision and values of your organization? Which has led us on to asking the Simon Sinek question of why you do what you do. Because the question, they then go, oh, well, we have a vision, we know where we're going. I said, okay, so if I was to walk around your organization and ask anybody, what are the vision and values in the organization, would they know them? And secondly, are they aligned with them? And thirdly, do they care?
Exactly.
Because there'll be a direct reflection of who you're being in the organization. As we start to ask these questions, there is a realization that comes from the senior leader to go, well, okay, you're working with this individual. I ask them quite early on, what changes have you seen? What's different in the individual? Because I'm in this for the long game as well. So I look to the future and I go, at some point, the person who is slightly outside the circle, or as far as I'm concerned, they're working in an old paradigm. And a lot of the organizations I work with are working in that old paradigm. It's a triangular, it's the guy at the top makes a whole load of decisions, actually becomes the block to the growth of the organization. So what I do is I say, okay, we will regularly have a conversation about what results you're actually seeing. But before we start, I want to know what results you want to see, so that I can manage your expectations as to whether or not they're realistic, or whether they're achievable, smart goal kind of thing. So I hope that's answering your question, in that if the individual is slightly aloof and wanting to be part of the process initially, it's usually fear-driven. We get that, but we'll work on that over time. But secondly, I need to know what sort of results they're really looking for. And 9 times out of 10, the answer ends up being, I want them to be a better leader. Which frankly, between you and me, as far as I'm concerned, is actually holding a mirror up to that individual. He wants to be a better leader, or she wants to be a better leader, and is projecting onto somebody else on the team. So we do the work, we get some results, and then actually we end up with the whole organization on board.
And I think that's where you and I have a special role, because if you've got directors who are frustrated because they want to work together as a team and they just aren't able to tell, or the top guy isn't listening to the frustrations that they have, then we, as sort of, if you like, outside facilitators, can sort of make that happen. And I think very often my observation is that the expectation is we'll rock up with a set of tools and say, this is how you do it, and when that happens, there's a lot of pushback. Yes, we have tools, but I think the first thing is, as you say, let's sit down and say, what's the current situation? Where do we want to be? What implications if we don't do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's the benefit of doing it, and then how are we going to get, and I think if you and I in our roles can facilitate a conversation with the leadership teams like that, that can unlock that whatever it is, that's secret bullet, silver bullet to get things moving.
Well, you bring up a very valid point again as regards we have to build trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we build that trust, which isn't a quick fix, it's not a pill. And when we do build that trust and they start to see some results, then it's a much easier move to go organization wide or spread it out to other key individuals within the organization. Some of the ways I like to do that is that I will not overpromise, but I will make sure that everybody is included in some way, shape, or form as early as possible. And I find that's almost like giving people a little taster of something. So if they're involved in a 360 feedback, they're already seeing what this thing looks, feels, smells, tastes like. So they start to get a bit of exposure to it. And as they are exposed and they understand it a little more, then the fear level drops down. So one of the things that I really notice, and this is for any organization, individuals within any organization ask 3 questions, subconscious questions, in every single interaction. And we do it coming on here just now. We do it as we share information and ideas with people. You meet somebody in the street, you do the same thing. The 3 questions that we ask is, am I safe? Do I belong? And do I matter? Now, if you as a leader in an organization can happily answer those questions for everybody in your organization,
you're in a good place.
You're in a great place, an outstanding place. And that safety is interesting connection back to the Google findings, is psychological safety. That psychological safety is based on emotional safety.
It's based on vulnerable trust.
Trust, exactly. So
it all comes together.
All totally connected. If you are safe in any environment and you're physically, mentally, emotionally safe, contrary to public belief, you will be willing to do more. As opposed to, oh, I'm safe, I don't have to do anything. If you have an organization that has motivated people in it, your job as a leader is to engage, influence, and inspire. And you do that by answering the 3 questions. Are they safe? Do they belong? And do they matter? With safety, it's psychological, emotional, and it's built over time. It's built in the interactions. It's built in, will you do what you say you'll do? Do you care about the individual? i.e. the next question is, do I belong? That belong is, do I belong with this tribe? Are these my people? Do I fit in? Have we got the same values? Are we aligned? So you got now safe and belong. And then the last one is, do I matter? And that's where the conversations between senior leaders, all the way down to janitors, all the way down to the shop front, whichever organization you're in, does the leader know my name? I mean, it's astounding in some organizations of only a couple of hundred people that the CEO or the managing director doesn't know the name of every individual within that organization. And when you answer those 3 questions, safe, belong, matter, people step up and they will give more than the job role and the contract and the CV says they can. And they start to bring the extra 1 or 2%, the extra 5%. That's where, once you're building the trust, that's where people feel safe, they belong, they matter, and they give more. And your business thrives.
That's right. And that mattering is important. It comes back to it's the old trite story of, am I laying bricks or am I building a hospital where sick people get better? It's that connection to the higher purpose that's important. That's a leadership job, to make sure that everybody in the organization connects that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is one thing we haven't talked about in relation to trust, and that's that we have different natural behavioral profiles. So I know you use Enneagram.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with DISC, but there's Myers-Briggs and those sort of things. But
Yes.
all of us are naturally more sort of extrovert, fast-paced, open or cautious. Warm or reflective, and take our time, and understanding each other's natural profile is often quite an important first step in starting to move towards that vulnerable trust. So in the work that I do, I use DISC. I know you use Enneagram. So that's I think very often you can get people who rub up the wrong way because they don't understand, that they are basically different styles. I remember back to when I was working for a large lubricant business, and I always rubbed up the wrong way with a European regional supply chain director, because he was in DISC terms a C. He wanted every I dotted and every T crossed, and I'm an I. I was talking big picture and rah rah, and we just couldn't communicate. And I thought he didn't like me, but he wasn't on the same wavelength as my thinking. So I had to accommodate my style, and we got on much better after that.
Well, it's interesting that you raise that again, is because we all, we're talking really about self-awareness.
Yeah.
The first pillar, if you like, of emotional intelligence. And something we both know and love.
Yeah.
And every day is a school day as we try to become more aware, self-aware. But the point that you make about understanding. Now, when you understand yourself, as Aristotle said, know thyself first. When you understand yourself, you're actually better able to work this vehicle, or you start to become more responsible for what comes out of your mouth. The thoughts you think, the things you say, and the actions you take. As you do that, you realize that this wonderful view on the world that you hold, that you look at the whole experience you're having through, you suddenly realize that it's not the same as everybody else's, and everyone else doesn't hold the same worldview that you do. Once you step into that and you realize that, well, there's about 7 billion people on the planet. So if I've got one view, I might be similar in my view to you, Ian, and yet it's not the same view. So as I become more self-aware, and then I realize other people have a different view, the only next natural step, if you're willing to grow and evolve, is to try to put yourself in their position a little bit, so that you can better understand them and how they view the world.
The golden rule.
And then if you do that, the next natural thing to do is, well, if I want to increase my communication level with this person, how should I be interacting and speaking with them? And if you move to that space, you suddenly find that as you change and modify how you interact with different people, and that's not being disingenuous to yourself or untrue to yourself. That's you facilitating better conversations. Well, strangely, when you do that and you start to communicate with other people in the way, they like to be communicated with, they start to see you as a bit like them. And as they start to see you as a bit like them, they start to feel safer. So you then start to build rapport and trust between you. Now, as the way I put this usually is, I go, look, in every interaction, one person has got to be the adult. So what do adults do when there are kids around? Okay, there's lots of answers to that. But if a young person is coming up to you and wants to express something, what do you generally do as an adult? You listen.
You listen.
The idea, and as you listen, you gain an understanding of what's going on for them. So when you're being the adult in a conversation and you're having this interaction, the first thing to do is to really listen to what they're saying. As you listen and you actively listen, you ask questions to understand, rather than doing what most people are doing, is they're just waiting for a break in the conversation.
Get
You
in
come up
there.
for air
Get in there.
so that they can just tell you what they think.
How good they are.
Exactly. So if you're willing to do that, now remember you've done a bit of self-awareness, and now you're understanding there's a different view of the world, and you're stepping into their shoes, and then you're coming back and going, how would I wish to communicate with this person if I want the outcome to be great? Then as you do that, you build trust, and then you're really quickly answering the question of safe, belong, and matter. They matter to you because you're active listening and trying to understand. They belong with the organization because you're in deep conversation and really trying to connect with them, and they feel safer. And these things start to build the trust. And I'll bet your relationship with the C, the guy, improved.
Oh yeah, massively.
When you understood. So that understanding comes from education. So the first thing, I'm going to just nail this last little point for us. Okay. We have to be a little bit careful of education. You know the phrase that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, we'll make that a little shorter. Remember this in every interaction that you have. If you're trying to get a point across to anybody, the first place is empathy. Empathy before education. So if you empathize and really try to understand what's going on for the other person, as they have been heard and understood, they've released they really know that you care, you'll see a change in their demeanor where they'll relax. And it's in that moment that you're able to move into some form of education as needed. So we've covered an awful lot here, and I think we could go on for hours on this particular subject, to be honest. But hopefully we shared a couple of key points about how to go about building trust in organization. Should we do a quick summary from your point and a quick summary from mine on how to build
quick summary from my point is I think we've got a lot of ground on the elements that make up vulnerable trust, the importance of vulnerable trust, and from my point of view, how I that in the model that is the 5 behaviors that really helps a team get cohesive and high performing.
So we're really looking at two angles here. Is what are the behaviors present in the team? What are the behaviors that help a team? And trust being one of them. We've delved down into how to build that trust, and really that is that vulnerable trust that's needed. Everybody needs to be involved and committed to growing the culture in the organization. They need to have courage to be involved in a 360 in some way, shape, or form. They also need to be willing to be responsible for what they think, what they say, and the actions they take. The realization that every single person is trying to get the three questions answered: safe, belong, matter.
It starts from the top.
And it starts from the top, and you make sure that in every single interaction, you do a little empathy before education. Little empathy before education. Are they fully heard and understood? Be the adult in that interaction. Are they fully heard and understood? And then if the answer to that is yes, as you do that with everyone in the organization, no matter where they work within it, and do it with yourself, then you start to build the basis of trust, which is that first pillar on the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Shall we call it a day there?
Well, I hope that was useful to
whoever's watching.
About 40 minutes or so. Thank you so much, mate.
Okay. Cheers. Enjoyed it.
And
we must do it again.
We'll do it again next week.
Next week.
Yeah, perfect.
Look at commitment.
Yeah, perfect. Looking at commitment. So we're committed to looking at commitment. Perfect.
Cheers, Sean.